Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic Time Reviews and General Musical Meanderings. This week got another Roundup post for you guys. 6 albums I've been listening to in rotation with some other stuff for about the last 4 weeks or so. And this is just meant to be sort of really superficial overviews of these albums, maybe to generate some interest in yourself, or maybe if you're curious about these albums, I could do deep dives in a little bit later on. But for now, let's go ahead and get started on it. So the first one up is the Lickerish Quartet's Fables from Fearless Heights. The Lickerish Quartet has been in existence since about 2017, and it consists entirely of ex-Jellyfish members. In fact, this group is a trio of musicians, Eric Dover, Tim Smith, and Robert Joseph Manning Jr. made up 3/4 of the last touring lineup of Jellyfish. So between 2020 and 2022, the Lickerish Quartet released 3 EPs. And I didn't listen to any of those EPs. I was really white-knuckling the whole experience with the Lickerish Quartet because I was hoping that those EPs would be compiled into a full album. I mean, I tend to gravitate towards more a full album experience than EPs anyway. But soon after Volume 3 was released, it was announced that there would be a full album, and that was released, and this is what this is. So I'm walking into this one at the beginning of this last month without any real idea about what these songs are about. There's a little snippets here and there that I've heard. I gotta say, it's a fantastic collection of songs, as you'd probably expect. All 3 of these musicians are fantastic songwriters, and they really combine super well into this group, the Lickerish Quartet. The songs on Fables from Fearless Heights are detailed and harmonically rich, and melodically very interesting. It's everything that you'd hope for from guys who were in Jellyfish, and you know what kind of implications, if you know anything about Jellyfish, you know the implications of that style of power pop. It's very detail-oriented.
It's a magic number, times we can pretend. There is a number that's hanging over the lies we have said. When I read your mind, I can see the lights go dim.
Now, heads up, this is not really a Jellyfish rehash, you know. A Jellyfish music came very specifically from the collaboration between Andy Sturmer and Robert Joseph Manning Jr. Their collaboration generated the style that became Jellyfish. So without Andy Sturmer, you don't have Jellyfish. You really can't get there. But it is interesting because these 3 musicians never really wrote together. Robert Joseph Manning Jr. and Eric Dover wrote together in Imperial Drag, but really these 3 musicians really haven't collaborated in the same way. So you end up with a different set of writing styles. You know, Robert Joseph Manning Jr. kind of gravitates more towards very saccharine, Paul McCartney-esque type music. Tim Smith is more along the lines of like Crowded House and XTC. And Eric Dover kind of falls more into the streamlined rock sensibilities of like Queen. And although all those artists I'm talking about arguably can be power pop, they definitely have some styles that diverge from one another. And you see that a little bit on the Lickerish Quartet album here. In many ways, it's not as stylistically cohesive as Jellyfish was. But despite the fact you have these different styles of power pop, it still holds together because of the very unique playing and personality of these 3 musicians who are just fantastic all the way through. Man, you come for the songwriting in this album, but I guarantee you're going to stay for Tim Smith bass playing. It is fantastic, especially when he breaks out the fretless. I really love his melodic feel, but it's a melodic feel that never it gets in the way of the song, and it really gives an amazing kind of shape to the songs as they progress from one verse to the next. All right, next up I got Alex Anthony Faide's Particles of the Infinite. I heard about Alex Anthony Faide, probably like a lot of people, through Robert Fripp's advocacy. Robert Fripp came out a little while back and said that Alex Anthony Faide plays Fripp's parts better than Fripp does, better than I do. Robert Fripp has really called out groups in the past that he has respected, musicians that he's respected. So I trust his opinion on this. And sure enough, Alex Anthony Faide is a devotee of guitar craft and has a relationship with Robert Fripp through that guitar circle practice. And you could arguably say that Particles of the Infinite is basically Larks, Tongues, and Aspic parts 5 through 14. And you could always level the criticism that that he's just kind of a clone of Robert Fripp. But really, if you're going to clone somebody and do it well, you know, Robert Fripp is one of the guys I think that's is an admirable goal to try to capture. in a way, kind of like Fables from Fearless Heights, Parts of the Infinite is presented in a triptych. So parts 1 through 3 is part 1, parts 2 through 3, parts 3 through 6, parts 7 through 9. But rather than being held together by like a release date or something, they're held together more like by melodic ideas and by technical execution. Techniques that Alex Anthony Faide used to execute the various melodic aspects of those songs. Those triptychs are held together by those threads. And sometimes you got to admit, he really, really leans into the Frippisms. I mean, I think part number 5 pretty much sounds like, Locked Tongues and Aspic, just a little bit altered. But there are also parts in here where he uses that again as a place to express himself a little more freely. And I really enjoy the sections, I think, where he sheds his love for Fripp a little bit, because you see his personality come through a little bit more. Robert Fripp's personality on his guitar playing is all about the fact that it's so strict. It almost has zero personality. That's its personality. So for him to diverge from that and show a little bit more of his own voice in that style is the parts of this album that I think are really the most successful. But overall, it's a very fierce and heavy recording, but also super nuanced and a great listen for folks that are fans of that style. All right, next up I got Nilufer Yanya's Painless. This is her second album. This is London-based singer-songwriter and guitarist. Her style kind of has, to me, a little bit of an overlap with the XX. It has that kind of dark, moody feel that the XS had. But her style is a little bit more urban and a little more sunny. And although it doesn't get all the way into like the ASMR territory of Billie Eilish or what she would do, there's still a sense this is very up close and personal type music, and it kind of whispers in your ear in that same way.
These thoughts, keeping like the way I can't stop. Some kind of way I am lost. In another life I was not. Running through my veins, I let you walk away. I can't watch all over my face. Now I'm picking up the pace.
Now I'll say that Painless has outstanding songwriting throughout. Whenever I first listened to it, that's one of the things that really caught me. Although I will say that there's a little bit of a melodic flatness to the way that she approaches a lot of her music. Her melodies don't take big interval jumps very often, which is something that I find appealing personally. But her vibe is great, and I think if there's anything on this album that really makes it stand out is the very unique production techniques that she uses, and the overall vibe of the album. Actually, in many ways, I think that Yanya's guitar playing sort of overshadows her vocals from time to time, not in the sense of the mix, but in the sense of interest. A lot of the riffs and licks that she uses are very subtle and interact with the melody in unique ways, and I find myself often more drawn to her guitar playing than even her vocals. Okay, next up I got Ibibio Sound Machine's Electricity. Ibibio Sound Machine is a London-based group, but they had their tendrils kind of spread out into various cultural musics. There's a member of their band that's from Ghana. The lead singer, although is born in London, has a lot of roots in Nigeria. Their percussionist is Brazilian, so they definitely have a sense of trying to congeal this sort of Afro-Cuban style of music into a more contemporary funk setting. What this album does that kind of distinguishes it from Ibibio Sound Machine's previous works is it's very, very electronic in its approach. It's a little bit less funk and Afrobeat and a lot more like disco and dance hall styles. And this electronic angle that they have in this album, I think, is due in no small part to the incorporation of the production crew Hot Chip. Hot Chip comes in and gives this really contemporary electronic production bed upon which all of this kind of Afro-funk lies. And then, matter of fact, that production kind of reminds me of Mike Snow from a decade ago now. Mike Snow had this really great production team that was the basis for all the backgrounds on that one. And the richness of that recording kind of has a relationship, I think, not stylistically, but in terms of its sound, to what I hear on Ibibio Sound Machine. And the net effect is that, even though it's a pretty electronic album, the electronics tend to energize, I think, the recording and the sort of sense of tradition without mowing over it and turning it into something else. Okay, next up I got Lemon Demon's Spirit Phone. Lemon Demon is the project of musician and comedian Michael Cicigera. And Cicigera has a pretty significant online presence. So he not only does music, but also puts out flash videos and remixes things. And I characterize Lemon Demon kind of in what I would call a quirk rock, They have a real relationship to like Mark Mothersbaugh and Devo, also like Oingo Boingo, and maybe even a little bit later, like Yesayer, that vein of sort of slightly off-kilter, bizarre pop music. And I gotta say, Spirit Phone is incredibly imaginative. There's a lot of that goes into it. And again, not unlike the Lickerish Quartet album, there's lots and lots of details that go into this album.
Big cat, space Nazis, Robert Stack, God damn it, gonna snap, Leonard Nimoy, call me back, I try to call you every day, I'm rehearsing what to say when the truth comes out.
And in a way, it can kind of be overwhelming, especially if you're a person who feels like maybe there's a lot going on with this album. It can kind of maybe get a little bit obnoxious. I don't feel like that. I feel really engaged with this album as I listen to it. Even more so when I consider the Bandcamp release. I got this through Bandcamp, and there's also a 13-track bonus section when you download it from Bandcamp, which makes this album, if you look at it on the whole, almost 2.5 hours long. It's a long recording if you include all those bonus tracks. But I think a lot of the bonus tracks are as crucial and as good as many of the songs on the original album. And for a long time, I couldn't even tell where the album started and the bonus tracks started. I had to really do some research on that. So I see it as one big, long, almost double album. And that's just, even though it is long and it can tax the patience if you were trying to sit down and listen to it in one setting, it's still really super interesting and a lot of fun to listen to, and a lot of really great songwriting happening on the album. And finally, I got Loris S. Sarid's Seabed-Sunbath. And his previous album was an album called Music for Tomatoes, and was sort of inspired by gardening and the growth of plants. Now, this album has a similar theme, but it has a sort of this aquatic feel to it. Of course, it's called Seabed-Sunbath, which is in and of itself suggestive, as is the album cover with this like sea green color and sort of vaguely coral shapes that are going on with it. I think that there's something evocative about that as well. But from the very first second you listen to this album, it's very descriptive of the beach and coral reef ecosystems. And I think it's really amazing how Sarid is able to sort of create this environment and then not just write about it, but actually almost live within it. Like it feels like he's writing this from within the ecosystem and sort of commenting on what he sees through the music on this album. This is kind of a new age affair overall. You can look at it that way. It's got a lot of synthesizers. It's got some more, physical instruments. There's a kalimba, and there's also like field recordings, textural field recordings that all go into it. But really, ultimately, it's a very vivid and very almost visceral reenactment of that sort of ecosystem. And there's a real comforting warmth from the exactness with which he creates this album based on his own perception of that environment. But that's all I'm going to say about Loris S. Sarid and all of these albums this week. If you like this video, of course, please like and subscribe and share it out with your friends. Follow me over on Spotify. I've been putting tracks up from all of my roundups. These are going to be albums that go into competition with others as we go through the top 20 bracket eliminations in the coming months. If you want to know when those are going to be happening, of course, keep your eyes open. And until then, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.